So the first one I just want to talk that we were going to go over was, so the other day I was I always I'm always looking for different articles and that on different graphics cards and different things, especially for my different sort of news videos I do and other things. And I found this one. So this is from a website called Full Exposure Photography, and it's the AMD Radeon VII versus NVIDIA RTX 2080. So this is pretty common comparison. I think, pretty much everyone's done it, I would say, except for me. But it's been widely covered anyway, because the cards are so similar, both in price, who they were aimed at, and performance-wise, through most people's testing, they were somewhat similar depending on resolution. That seemed to have a sort of significant that would change it a bit, so the 2080, this is just from what I've seen, the 2080 would generally do better at the sort of 1080p stuff, and then as you went up through the resolutions, it would bring them a bit closer, with the Radeon 7 doing a bit better. So anyway, so I was looking through, and I found this one. So this website I'm unfamiliar with. I was interested straight away reading through it, because I think something us tech reviewers rarely talk about is the fact that we because we're so used to testing tech, we're so used to how we do it, how we conduct our tests. It makes it much easier for us to see if a test or the way someone has conducted their review can be a bit skewed in one way or the other. And we often pick up on that. And so this one, straight away, though, you don't need to be any sort of tech expert. So if I scroll down here for you guys, so we can see reasons to buy the 7, so they list all of these in green with ticks next to it. Reasons to buy the 2080 with a red tick mark and X's, superior ray tracing. That's an X. Okay, I get it. Like, some of you guys aren't fans or don't see the merit in ray tracing. That's fine, but that doesn't... you don't put it just X next to it. Superior, the tensor. That again, this is...
Can I just jump in, Kev?
Yeah, sure. Go for it, man.
I think one of the main reasons you would want to buy a Radeon 7 is for those 30% more CUDA cores.
30% more CUDA cores. That's an absolute shocker. So this is something I see a lot of guys get tripped up over. So you'll see that this is something you'll see going forward will get even more confusing. And we'll talk about this a bit more later when we talk about the Intel GPU stuff. So AMD call them, usually they say something like stream processors. Then NVIDIA will say CUDA cores. And Intel says EUs, or... what's the proper name for it?
That's their clusters, but basically it's
all the same thing, essentially.
Their way of describing what they call a core in their architecture.
So this saying CUDA cores is inaccurate. You could, because a CUDA is something that's exclusive to how NVIDIA says it. So you would say 30, you could just take the CUDA out. You would just say 30% more cores or 30% more stream processors or something like that.
Completely irrelevant comparison.
Which doesn't matter.
It's completely meaningless. Doesn't matter at all.
Yeah, so that's a good catch. Yeah, so just jump in if you see anything else, Steve. So we see 5% faster boost speeds. Okay, that's, again, clock speed. If you guys watch the Hardware Legends on the 9590, you'll know clock speeds are pretty irrelevant, because even back then when Sandy Bridge was out, the 9590 was running at 5 gigahertz, and the Sandy Bridge CPUs were running at the 2600 was 3.8, and the 2700K was 3.9 gigahertz, and they were matching the 9590 at stock speeds. And that was, more than a gigahertz difference in speed. So this 5% faster, that's just 30% more stream processors. So this is essentially saying the same thing as the first thing, but that doesn't even make sense. 100% more memory. So one has 8 and one has 16. So technically that's correct. 43% faster memory. Okay. 1,500% bigger memory interface.
That's a good one.
1,500%. Guys, what do you guys think of that in the chat? 15% more. 123% higher memory bandwidth, and 38 faster floating point. 32 what? 38 faster floating point, 32 precision. Do they mean?
They're just competing direct statistics. So I mean that is, well, it's probably more relevant than anything else there. Really, the only thing in that list that you would probably pay attention to is the 100% more memory, the
Yep.
16 gigabyte HBM2 memory buffer.
Yep.
But whether that's useful or not is another thing. So it is. I don't know if it's a reason to buy it. You could argue either way. It's not terribly beneficial right now, so I don't like to push things like that. That I can't show you any tangible gains right now. So people will argue either way on that one, but I think for now, 8 is fine. What are your thoughts on that, Kev?
Yeah, I agree. I think for people doing productivity stuff with the Radeon 7, obviously having a lot of memory, and it's very fast memory as well. That's not to say GDDR6 is slow by any means, but for those people who have more unique use case scenarios, then I think in terms of productivity, then the Radeon 7 may be beneficial. But for gamers, which is going to be the majority of people buying these cards, the 8 gigs I got the RTX 2080, and I run a 4K monitor and I game at 4K, and it hasn't been an issue. It hasn't been an issue at all. So I don't think 8's an issue. Often, I think this is what trips up some of you guys, and I think Steve would agree with this. Oftentimes, a lot of games we play, especially when we go to test them at 4K, they'll have something at the bottom that says amount of video memory used, and if you put it up to 4K, it'll go like maxed out, or it'll do. Oftentimes, those games vastly overestimate how much memory they're going to need, and so Rainbow Six Siege is an absolute shocker for it. You turn everything up, max out the settings at 4K, and it's like, oh, it needs like 9 gigabytes of video memory. Then you actually run the game and it uses like 5. It's GTA 5 is another absolute shocker for it. Like they vastly overestimate how much you need, and I think some people get tripped up by that.
Well, it's a very, very difficult subject to cover properly. We've attempted a few times, but yeah, it very much depends on the game, how the game handles memory usage. It's very difficult to test. But basically, as far as I can tell, 8 gigabytes is plenty for the moment. And we know that things in this industry don't move super fast, so 8 should be. Sorry if the wind's quite loud, by the way. It's not the best conditions here. Yeah, I think 8 will be fine, basically, is what I'm going with there. And it's just a hard thing to test. Like just the other day, I was playing around with 4 gigabyte and 8 gigabyte cards in a few different games at 1440p, such as Prey. And the performance goes unchanged, but it's the textures on the 4 gigabyte card were blurry because they weren't being rendered in properly. So just looking at performance is difficult. You've really got to do an image quality comparison, and some areas of the game will look fine, others won't. So yeah, it's a really hard thing to test. But basically, people sort of make out that if you don't have enough VRAM, it's going to be a disaster, which it really isn't. For the most part, you won't even notice that you don't have enough VRAM in certain games. And other times you've got to... Oh, it is absolutely pouring down here. I don't know is that loud on the mic or not too bad?
It's not too bad, man. Do you guys in the chat just let us know?
Yeah, apologies for that. I can't do too much about it. Yeah, so it's not so much a performance hit. It's more if something's missing from the visual. So it's a difficult thing to test, basically.
Yeah. We got that Steve ASMR, that rain noise ASMR for you guys.
There's probably a few guys that are in Victoria in the chat at the moment. I think a few of my Patreon members are in here, and they're experiencing the same kind of weather. But I have a tin roof, so it's very loud.
Oh,
and
wow, yeah.
I'm upstairs on a second story, so... it is actually hail, Jared, so... Yeah.
Crazy. So let's read this. We'll just read this conclusion, because we don't want to go through the whole thing. But they said... And we'll get Steve's reaction to it. So the AMD Radeon is set to be a superb choice for both content creators and gamers alike, especially those that like to enjoy some 4K gaming after a day's of work of editing and 3D rendering, because we all do that. Its insane memory specs, including 16 gigabytes of HBM2 VRAM running at 2000 megahertz speed on a 4096-bit interface bus and 1024 gigabits bandwidth capabilities will keep any 4K and even 8K video editor very happy and have zero problems loading even the most demanding games into memory.
Is this a CPU or a GPU?
While being able to seamlessly stream at the same time on a single PC without lag. The 2080, on the other hand, has superior ray tracing and Tensor AI cores to its name, which have great future potential, but at this current time don't have enough gaming or software titles available to show this off to its full potential. If you are looking at buying a card right now that will deliver better performance, then the Radeon VII is most likely going to be the best choice. I don't get this part. This is what I have the most demanding loading even the most demanding games into memory. Okay, what?
Yeah. It's not an SSD. Yeah, I mean, the conclusion isn't terrible. I was actually expecting it to probably be a bit worse. But yeah, I don't know what their benchmark data looks like to recommend. So basically, based on my own testing, which I did a month or so ago now, I think it was 33 games, something like that I tested. Across those games, the Radeon 7 was 7% slower at 1440p. I don't believe it's a 4K gaming card, so for me that's somewhat irrelevant. I don't think the RTX 2080 is either. I mean, it's borderline. For that, I'd really be going for an RTX 2080 Ti, but whatever. I mean, I feel like if you're gaming at 4K with a Radeon 7 or an RTX 2080, you're turning down some quality settings anyway, so you're probably reducing the amount of VRAM usage by doing that. But anyway, I found it to be 7% slower on average, and I think the crucial takeaway was the fact that the RTX 2080 was faster in the vast majority of the 33 games that I tested. So I think the Radeon GPU was faster by a 5% margin or greater in like 4 games, whereas it was like 20 games for the RTX 2080. So basically, for the same money, you're more likely to get a slightly superior gaming experience with the GeForce RTX 2080. And basically, by the time that 16 gigabyte VRAM capacity becomes beneficial, well, I don't think you'll be using either of these graphics cards. I think that's probably fair to say.
Yeah. I think this is also funny. They have a note here, which I think Steve would get a kick out of because of all this tech spot stuff. Note, this is a multi-page review allowing you to easily jump to the section that you are most interested in. Please use the top or bottom navigation menu system to do so. I do, however, recommend reading in sequence for the most information and value. It's like, okay, we know how to use a web page if you're gonna look at this graphics card. But look, it doesn't even work. Look, whichever one I click, and it's not that the internet's bad or like because I'm streaming. Like before, when I was just giving this a quick read before we started, it doesn't work. So you
might have to use the next or previous. I'd like to see their benchmark
we'll go
results and what games they tested to see how they drew that conclusion. I mean, the Radeon 7 is by no means a terrible buy. I don't particularly like the reference card. It's quite loud. Yes, you can manually tune the fan speeds and whatnot and make it bearable, but I'd prefer the out-of-the-box experience to be better than it is. If there was some really nice AIB Radeon 7 cards from Asus, Gigabyte and whatnot, then yeah, it'd probably be worth considering because it does do quite well in certain games. But I think it's just a safer, easier bet to get yourself an RTX 2080.
This is bizarre the way they've done the speeds comparison. Like this, and they're putting the percentage differences beside it. Like, oh, it's got 3,840 cores compared to 2,944. So it has 30% more cores, and it's got 5% higher clock speed. But remember, this is so misinforming. Okay, so my RTX 2080 has the same thing, 1710 boost speed. Okay, that's what it says on the box, but trust me, it goes up to like 1900 something on boost.
Yeah,
with GPU
operating
boost.
frequency. Yeah, operating frequency is very difficult to compare on paper like that. You really need to monitor it in quite a range of games to get an idea of where it generally sits.
And the other thing is, this is a peak speed for the Radeon 7. So they work kind of differently. Like Nvidia's kind of been actually, I would say, a bit more truthful in this, because this speed here is like, you'll often see higher than this. I'll put it that way. So the base speed, you'll never see lower than this unless something, whatever's happening. But this boost speed, even this speed, oftentimes you'll most likely see higher. Maybe if it gets really hot, or it's really hot inside or whatever, maybe you see it come down to there. But if you've got a cool sort of environment, somewhat cool, and a decent cooler on the card, all the rest of it, then you'll often see higher than this. Where the Radeon 7, I believe this is like the absolute top. It will not go higher than this amount, the rated boost speed, because it's a peak speed, isn't it? That's sort of like the absolute top it can do. So it's most likely going to sit somewhere between these two, where the Nvidia card will sit somewhere over this amount, which makes this whole point completely irrelevant and misleading, which I don't particularly like that.
Well, it's really why all this entire spec comparison is just completely and utterly meaningless, and as you say, misleading. Really, all you want to know is how they compare in games you'll be playing, or just a wide range of games, which is why we do the benchmarks we do, and which is another reason why it's good to look at a lot of different sources, not just my review or your review, but lots of them, because other people might test games I haven't. So yeah, best to see how they compare in a wide range of games, really, and go from there.
I think Steve's going to get a big kick out of this one. Memory interface bus, 4096 bits to 256 bits. So percentage difference, 1500% more bits. 1500% more bits, guys. Man, that must mean it's better. It's got nothing to do with the fact that this is HBM2 and this is GDDR6. So for you guys that are maybe a little newer, to make it very, very simple, HBM2 is the memory is stacked onto the GPU. It's basically it's put very close to the GPU. We'll put it that way. It's stacked right next to it. So you can have these huge memory interfaces where GDDR6 is more your standard memory chips that you guys might be aware of, like GDDR5. It's just a much newer version of that. So this comparison is just ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, the only interesting comparison there is the memory bandwidth, really. Yeah, but again, it doesn't mean a whole lot. It's probably the only thing worth bringing up, let's say, in the comparison. That and the capacity. Bandwidth and capacity, everything else is just noise.
Yeah. So we can do resolutions that no one cares about. Size and weight, okay.
Skip.
Technologies, yep, okay. Power and temperature, 215. Minimum required power, 88 degrees, 65. Okay, that's... So it seems like this site, although they've got a bit of GPU stuff, it seems like it's some GPU stuff anyway. They seem to be mainly... Okay, so here we have... Okay, so we have Tomb Raider. So this is just giving the average FPS. So this is a 1440p. I'm guessing these are just averages. And we're having Tomb Raider Shadow. So that's the older one, which is at 4544. That's interesting. Then they got the DirectX.
All those numbers at a glance look pretty accurate to me. I don't have any problems with the numbers they're showing, but it looks like overall they're showing very similar performance. I don't know if they give a total.
How did they work out that this is... Because it's up. It's down on every one except for... Oh, it's up on a few. But generally it's a bit lower. What did they say it averaged out? I mean, you could... They're saying win some, lose some results. But...
It looks like it lost more than it won, and when it did lose...
It lost by a lot.
Yeah, 17, so the results themselves 20, look accurate.
12, yeah, so it's definitely slower. Where it was up, it was only up by, 7%. That's a bit decent. In Battlefield 1, DirectX 12, so it's up a bit there.
Yeah, I saw 13% advantage for the Radeon 7 in Battlefield.
Yeah, and then if we do the 4K ones, we're seeing that again, the 2080 doing quite well. Maybe it pulled it in a little bit, but generally speaking, it pulled it in.
I just think we're looking at sort of amateur reviewers here. Their testing seems quite good, which is great to see. But I think they're reading too far into the specifications and weighing a lot of their opinion based on the numbers they're seeing on paper and thinking they mean more than they do, which is a bit strange because you think you would just test it and see how they actually compare in real world gaming situations. But yeah, they've got a bit sucked into the numbers, I think.
I think so as well. I mean, it's sort of funny that they went on about all the 1500% memory bus interface and all the rest of it. When they say here, the 4K benchmark test showed a similar pattern to the 2.5K, that's just 1440p if you guys don't know, benchmarks test. Even though the Radeon 7 has double the memory capacity as well as a much faster speed, this is just false. This is false. It's not going to be running fast, I guarantee it. Unless that RTX 2080 is like completely in like a microwave or something. Games obviously don't make of this much memory. So they're basically saying, hey, all that stuff we said earlier, you know, about how much more memory it has, it just doesn't matter. Because even at 4K, as we just spoke about before, it doesn't matter. 8 is still fine. You know, the 2080 is still fine. That's good memory. NVIDIA didn't just throw on whatever. They're not that stupid. So buying advice. So we can't bother reading this. This is the start stuff, and that's what we talked about. But well done, AMD. I applaud you. Keep it coming. I can't wait to what Zen 2 brings us. Wow. Okay. So yeah,
I'm glad someone was excited and enjoyed Radeon 7 upon initial review.
Yeah, it seems. Yeah. So this is definitely an interesting way. I think it could be. This is just a person that maybe is a little bit newer to tech reviewing or something like that, and is just basing a lot of it off. But I think even that being said, this how you guys can see now, this how they've done this with the red and that, this is just appalling. You should never do this. This is just, if I did this on my channel or Steve did this on his channel, oh my goodness, the backlash would just be horrendous. And it's not like we're just, you know, picking on these guys because it's to do with an AMD card. If you guys remember back when Tom's Hardware did the NVIDIA just buy it thing, we all gave them a hard time about that because that was just ridiculous, you know, with the RTX cards. Oh, how much of your life do you not want to be ray traced? Oh no, what was it? When your life flashes before your eyes, how much of it do you not want to be ray traced? And just like I actually thought it was a joke, and then it ended up being true. So yeah, this is just a bit silly.